So today I'll be talking, and Cormac stole some of my thunder before showing you my cover of our document that I'll be getting to shortly, but I'll just go on a little journey with you first, just to think about, I don't have to talk to any of you about this, I'm sure. I'm preaching to the converted, as many as have said. We all know the benefits of urban trees and how important they are, particularly in our environment where we have all of those impacts of the hard surfaces and the buildings that we have and infrastructure. So when we think about, well, what's the right tree to plant, I put this there just as a little mind map because it doesn't nearly cover, a fraction of the things that we think about. If you think, oh, just pop a tree in the ground, but when you actually think about, well, which one is the right one and can I fit it in where I want it to go, that's just the start. Now, that doesn't even talk about our pollinators. It doesn't talk about, I don't think there's any, it doesn't talk about services. Well, it's got a little bit of below ground. And the big thing, the absolute trump card it doesn't talk about, is people. Now, people have all of their own opinions, and it could be, I don't like leaves in my gutters, I don't like the shade on my solar panels, I don't like what it looks like, what it smells like, what it drops, who comes and eats it and what they drop and what that does. So, if I had $1 for every person that contacted us and said, I love trees, but, and if I had every but, and said, yep, okay, you can remove it, we wouldn't have any trees. So I want to get out there that we fight tooth and nail every day to save every tree we can. And some, as we've heard before, do have to go because they are presenting a risk to the community. But we really, I've never met such a passionate team as I have in the tree unit. And they are, I've spent, half an hour to an hour on a phone on a Friday afternoon convincing one person to accept a tree to be planted in front of their house. And it felt fantastic when she said yes. But it was a battle because she wanted to park on her verge, which is illegal. Yeah.
Do you think the rates could be reduced by $1 for every tree we plant?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, and when we've talked about money and that there should be more money spent on trees, and I'm going to really try and keep to my 10 minutes, but when you think about all the services the government provides, all of our ministers that represent, what I do, so my minister is Minister Steele, he goes to Cabinet and he fights tooth and nail and argues that he should have money to spend on planting trees, but every other minister's doing the same thing, and there's only so much money in the coffer. So we're all saying that, no, planting trees is more important than schools or hospitals or roads or footpaths. We all want that money so that we can provide the best service we can. So we're all out there for you. But we know that it's not just one scenario, it's changing. So climate is one thing that we know is changing, and that for us doesn't just mean hotter summers, it means less rain throughout the year that we were expecting. We're getting drier winters, drier springs. So when we go to plant in spring, the ground is so dry and hard that it's not a great planting environment. And that will keep changing. But unfortunately for us, while it's getting hotter, it's not getting any less cold. So Canberra's a really difficult place because it's hot and it's cold and it's dry and the soils are rubbish. So don't get me started how hard it is to grow things here sometimes. So we do our best. And we're also trying to keep hold of our old trees because they are so super important, as you know. And some of the trees in Canberra have been here a long time, and when new suburbs are developed, we do our best. We fight tooth and nail for every tree that we can to be retained. But we know, as we've shown in the photo by Mike, that they want they're making a new suburb to build houses, not to retain all the trees, or there wouldn't be any room for the houses. So we fight tooth and nail, and when we get one, we try and really look after it, and we're trying to do a lot better on that, and that includes cultural trees as well, to make sure we're providing the best environment to make sure that those cultural trees live as long as they possibly can. And it's certainly possible for our trees to live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So this is our document that we put together, and we've renewed it, and we will continue to renew it. It's not a stagnant document, so it's going to grow and grow and change. So the trees in particular, we've spent a lot of time on. It also lists shrubs and water plants and grasses, and that's a continuing journey for us to make sure that that's current and applicable, that they grow here, they're tried and tested. Now, in a lot of the information that's in there, and I'll get to some of that in a second, they're not a tree for everyone. So these are not trees that will grow absolutely anywhere. Some of them are a little particular, but they're still worthy of being on the list because there will be a spot where that tree will be suitable. So in addition to this, we have, for all of our trees only, not the shrubs and grasses, we have an information sheet, so a fact sheet, and that will provide more information about that particular tree. Now this is available on the web, so you can go and see this one right now, and our fact sheets are being updated as we speak. Hopefully they'll be up next week, the new versions. So inside there's a lot of information about growing the trees and the space they need and the design standards, that sort of thing. But when we get to the individual tree list, they're separated into sections. So there's native and exotics have been separated, and some basic sizing groups. So on there we'll have a lot of information about the trees, but something that was really special that was introduced last week was information from Act for Bees that told us about the flowering times, the nectar, the pollen, and who are the ones that like to utilise that tree, so that we can start to really look at that continuous foraging throughout our environment and the connectivity that we've all heard so much about. So there's this something there throughout the year for these special things. So in that list, so that's a bit easier to see because it's very small print, I'm afraid. It's great. It's a great online document because the more we add, and there's still more we'd like to add to it, it just gets bigger and bigger and it's a bit hard to print out. So looking at the things on there that are included, one of the main things is management and siting notes. So that's where we put that particular information to say, if you love silver birch, and it has its place, Betula pendula, it's a beautiful tree, stunning tree, and there's not a lot of other trees that look like it. It's quite different, but it's becoming harder and harder to grow in the ACT environment. But there's still going to be places where that could go. If you've got a nice sheltered shady corner where it's irrigated grass, you could stick one there and it'll be fine. We're not going to plant them as street trees. Okay, so there's while it's a list for a whole bunch of uses, there are lots of trees in there that are getting more and more into a niche species. And some really important, excuse me, that extra information that was added. Now, the next thing I'm really excited about is we're developing a web app, and it's been developing for some time, and unfortunately with changes of staff, it keeps having to get momentum going again. But you'll be able to go onto the web and say, okay, I've got this scenario. I want a tree that's medium height, medium canopy spread, it's a native. I want it to be relatively drought tolerant. You can answer as many or as few questions as you'd like, and it will give you some suggestions that you could plant these trees. So this, I think I put medium height, medium canopy, native, moderately drought tolerant, and left it at that. So I didn't answer all the questions. It gave me two trees that were suggested that would be useful. And from that, you can click on that and get one of those fact sheets. So that's coming soon. So it's not quite there, but that's going to be really useful for people to have a think about. That's the site I'm trying to fill. We've updated our species tree planting specifications because any nursery will tell you that preparation is everything. So our ground is really hard. It's solid clay. It's if you dig a hole that you think is nice and big enough, you plant your tree in it, and if you do get rain, it becomes a glass, and all that water will sit in it, and your roots will rot. So we can have too much water. Heaven forbid we should have too much water, but we can, on those one occasions. And that's what we're going to see with the less frequent but more heavy rainfall. You're going to get larger volumes of water in a short time, and it will either run off, or if you get a patch where it tends to collect, that water could sit there, and then you'll have the end of the scale. So looking at making sure our contractors, and anyone else who wants this information is welcome to it, our contractors are doing the very best when they plant the tree, so that it's got that best chance right from the start. And we're doing what we can to look after our remnant trees. Now, our arborists they had the best day. We had some arborists come up from Victoria who are really experienced at creating habitat hollows, and they trained our guys to create a variety of different hollow types. First on the ground, so they were not learning from the air, but so some of them were for lizards, for bats, for a variety of different sizes of birds, and this was just heaven for them because part of their job is keeping the community safe, and they do have to go out and remove trees or prune trees, but this is what they love to do, something that provides such benefit for everybody. So this one is up in, it's in a open space opposite Hawker College, and unfortunately there's a few trees that have died there, and we're looking at why that's occurred. There is evidence of groundwater sheeting across that site, and as we've talked before about pesticides and insecticides, that may have been insecticides used on private land, then washing across the open space And we had a number of mature tree deaths in that site, and not just from this season. These have been dead for a couple of years. So, because we've all seen the canopies browning off across the ACT. So we've thought, well, okay, we don't want to just remove this tree. This tree still has purpose in life. So we've created hollows in that tree, and with different size holes. And we put a camera there, which was great, until the cocky bit the aerial off. So now we have to put a cage around it, which we sort of figured we should have been. Anyway, so great thing. But the next step is to do understory planting, logs and rocks on the ground to really make that an inviting site. And there's lots of research going on. Our friends at Environment have done some great research that's giving us more understanding and knowledge of what we need to plant where in terms of foraging corridors. So lots of work to show where they go, what they eat, and you can see a lot of what when they're stopping, the yellow is movement, but the blue is foraging. A lot of that blue is in the suburbs. It's not in the reserves. So it's really important that we've got a variety of species right across the landscape, the connectivity, that this one shows that you don't want more than 100 metres. Even if it's just a tree for transit, it's important. So while the foraging trees are super important, the connectivity of trees so they can safely get from foraging tree to foraging tree is really, really important. So as you could see from that first mind map that had, not even a fraction, if I put it all on the one screen, it would be too busy and too many words. Every time we plant a tree, we're going through the whole process of who's it for, what's the purpose of that tree, what's going to live, what's it competing against, and protecting it from all of those people who are, love trees, but, because they are active in the community. So we're always working towards making sure that we plant a tree, it's going to live, and going to provide that resource that we have in the end. So, whew, not much over 10 minutes. Yeah, no worries.